Excuse me, sorry. Broadcasting live.
Kidding me?
Yeah. You want a link? Yeah. Give me your email address. I'll send you the link right now.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to PostalVision 2020 511. Little pages this morning. And Bernard is giving me a hard time already about not starting the day as we would on the American style. This is a little kind of cross-ocean kind of rivalry there. We do like to start on time, and I apologize for being a little late. And we don't have a slide clicker yet, but Brian, how about a slide? Oh, yes, welcome to Washington. Doesn't quite look like this now, but it's beginning to feel that way. And just for those of us who've certainly been living, at least in this country, it's been a pretty rough winter. So we were pretty nervous, in fact, about even being able to do this week, considering we had, 6 inches of snow here a few days ago. So we're very lucky for that, and we're pleased you're all here. Thank you. This is what, Brian, go back. This is what it looks like at home when we left 2 days ago. That literally is in Connecticut. So we're really happy to be here where we don't have to do that. Those are our dogs. Go ahead, Brian. I just want to say welcome, basically, to everybody. First of all, returning registrants, and I think this being the 5th year, our Pentagon year here in Pentagon City. We are really pleased that some of you have been with us for 5 years. And I'm just curious, show of hands, how many people have been with us for 5 years? Quite a few. Wow, that is wonderful, and I do appreciate it. First-timers, I won't point you out, but thank you for joining us. We do have a lot of overseas visitors this year, and I'm really pleased with that. And my good friend now, Bernard Bukovc, I still can't get it right, who is the chairman of HIP, PIP. You'll hear more about HIP, has brought a number of colleagues from overseas in UPU, Switchpost, etc. And so we're really pleased that you've made this trip. Thank you. We are all about innovation and clearly inventors. We have analysts here. We have new ideas. We have everybody who could possibly have an interest in the ecosystem, the postal ecosystem, as we call it. And that's the idea, because we want to bring a lot of new ideas together with old ideas and turn it up and think about where we're going in the future. We do have USPS with us, and we have a couple of USPS speakers, of course, who are going to be with us, Jimmy Cochran and Gary Revlin. We have regulators, as we often do, from the OIG and the PRC. Chairman Robert Taub will be with us on and off as he can, and be with us certainly tomorrow afternoon. And we do have, believe it or not, someone from Congress. I won't point them out here yet, but and on their own initiative, the staffer from the Hill said, "Gee, what's this all about? We'd like to be there." And that's kind of a breakthrough for us, because it's been hard to get Congress to pay much attention. Obviously, we have a wonderful array of speakers. We have something like 40 of you here, so that makes up a good portion of the room. There are about 150 people, which I think is perfect. The room is filled. We're really happy with this venue. Hope everybody else is. It's working out really well. And again, it's something we've been trying to do is to bring in some younger people, some millennials. So I'm delighted to say that we do have a number of millennials and interns who are with us. There's some press, not a lot. I won't point you out, but everybody is a stakeholder, which is the point. and we welcome you all, and we encourage conversation. We've set this up this way to respond to really the how we could improve. In prior years, people have suggested we didn't have enough time to really talk, and we had too much going on, too many speakers, and frankly, didn't manage our time well. We have a lot of Q&A, and we also have specific workshop times. There's a facilitator named at each table, and we're going to have discussions accordingly. So that should be great. Some other just sort of housekeeping details. We're actually live right now. I think. Are we live, Lee? Okay, man. Hello, world. We are broadcasting. Is that the right term these days? Anyhow, we are live to the world from Google Hangout, and so this is available now to a lot of people for the first time who can't be here. We hope you're here next time, but welcome from the other side of the planet. We're going to have these workshops. I just want to give everybody the details also on Wi-Fi. We do have Wi-Fi and URSA. So if you want to get online, you can do that. And we will be doing some poll anywhere or poll everywhere, is it? And SurveyMonkey activities. So we're going to need to be able to get online then. If there are limited, and you can imagine in these things, seats that we have to buy. So if you're not using the Wi-Fi, please don't. But it's there for all of us if you need it. Hashtag, thank you, Lee, for that reminder. Hashtag PB2020. So we enjoy tweeting, and we're getting a lot more of that. And in the past year or so, if you have seen our website, PostalVision2020.com, we've been doing a lot of posts there, and we've got a lot of activity. And from this point on, we really intend to keep the conversation going year long. So let's see. I want to say special thanks, obviously, to all of our sponsors. I won't name each one of you now, but you're there, and on all the banners, etc. But particularly a few of you, like Click2Mail, Lee Garvey's operation is sponsoring and put together this hangout for us. IMS, John Vasha here has done this wonderful program for us once again. And Gray Hair Advisors has also been very, very helpful in early promotions. In addition, of course, we have the gold sponsors and silver sponsors, as you've seen here, and the associations that have been very supportive of us. So we thank you for all of that. We have exhibitors this year on a limited basis, as you've seen, so please stop by and see them during breaks and in a very limited way up and down the hallway. So that is, I think, got most of the details. Excuse me. We do have, we mentioned that we would have some books. Larry Weber and John Hagel here have both written books. John's is out of print, unfortunately. We tried to get it, but it's available electronically, and if you would send us an email, we'd be happy to offer you an electronic version from Kindle. And Larry's new book, The Digital Marketer, is available, so please pick that up. And Larry, you'd be willing to sign it if it's something good for you like that. So, without any of those further details, this conference is themed customers, connections, and collaboration. And we are very much influenced by the fact that these three words are really driving change. And particularly with the first one, customers, will be talking a lot about that and listening to John and Larry, who have written about this, and I think everybody's very much aware of the growing empowerment of the customer, and particularly the consumer. And that puts some stress on our system, which continues to be pretty well driven from the push side, and it's clearly becoming more towards pull. So with that theming, we want to explore what that really is going to mean for our postal parcel logistics future. And that's our speakers will all be addressing that. We'll have individual speakers and then panels accordingly. So with this, I'd now like to introduce our first speakers and panel. We won't be doing this for every individual because we really have this all handled in the brochure. Please look at this. But I'm really thrilled to have John Hagel with us this year. I first met John at an MIT platform conference that Marshall Van Alstyne put on. And I was very impressed with his thinking and presentation, and thought it would really fit with us. So, with John speaking initially, I was really impressed. John, first of all, is a graduate of Wesleyan, which is near us in Connecticut, and then he's got degrees from Oxford University, and as well as places like Harvard, which you've heard of, not only JD but MBA. So considerably credentialed in that regard. In his career, spent a lot of time at McKinsey, and then is ended up out on the West Coast in Silicon Valley. You may know that we're really concerned and interested about trying to bring in more of people from that world to Washington, which a lot of people think of from out there as La Brea tar pits, meaning it's where the dinosaurs are all struggling on the muck. Well, we're not dinosaurs, and so we want these people to come and realize that this is alive and well, but if we all work to connect and collaborate, we can really solve some problems and innovate. And we have a lot of innovators here and inventors who are going to talk to us about that. But John, I loved what's in this in John's bio says, if you don't mind my reading it. John frequently talks about the mounting performance pressure created by digital technology and promising approaches to help traditional companies make the transition from a linear to an exponential world. And clearly we are living in a time of exponential change. We are certainly in an area, a traditional world, and technology is bringing on this change. So we're going to hear from John Hagel initially, and then Larry Weber, who has been with us before. I think everybody knows Larry from the number of books that Larry's written, and particularly in the public relations area, built a business and sold it to, was it WPP or IPC? IPG, sorry, and became the largest PR firm in the world, Weber Shandwick. And Larry's out of that, retired from that, and also building some other businesses, and is a good friend from the Boston area. And then Marshall Van Alstyne is back with us again, and Marshall is a professor at BU and MIT, and platform economist, and has been working in the postal sector, and increasingly with us in the past several years. And he's also going to tell us about one of his new ideas, but that would be later in the program. But what we want to do initially is let John share his vision, and it comes from his book, The Power of Pull, and then sit down with Larry and Marshall. So what I'd like to do is have you three gentlemen come on up, and we'll get going. Thank you. Are we all hobbled here? Or do we have mics? Marshall doesn't have a, okay, here we go. Just in time. Okay. So please welcome John Hagel.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I think in all our daily lives that we all have a tendency to get consumed by the short-term pressures and needs of the moment. And what I want to do today is talk a little bit about some of the longer-term forces that are reshaping our global economy and society. It's something that we call the big shift. And there are many forces that are helping to drive that big shift. Our belief is we're only in the earliest portions of this transformation, so a lot more to be coming. But basically, one of the forces is digital technology infrastructures. that are being deployed on a global scale, and that have a highly disruptive impact because of the exponential change in terms of price performance that it's driving on a global scale. And I think often we tend to talk about, well, wait a minute, we had the steam engine, we had the telephone, we had electricity, all kinds of disruptive technologies in the past. I think what's really different about this one is that it continues to demonstrate exponential price performance improvement over a longer period of time than any previous generations of technology. So it's different from the previous technology disruptions that we've experienced. And it's not only that it's continuing at an exponential pace, but it's spilling over into a whole series of adjacent technologies. Everything from autonomous vehicles to Internet of Things to robotics, 3D printing. All of these areas starting to demonstrate the same kind of exponential price performance improvement that the core digital technologies have brought to our economy and society. Now, I come from Silicon Valley, and there's a tendency in Silicon Valley to give a talk where you focus on the incredible opportunities that are made available by all this technology. I wanted to focus initially on something that I call the dark side of this technology. And by that, I don't mean cybercrime or cybersecurity or a whole range of bad things that this technology can be used for. I'm talking about something that's actually very intrinsic to the technology. You can't get the technology without it. And that dark side is mounting performance pressure. Pressure is mounting as a result of this technology in many different forms. There's one form, which is the economic impact of digital technology, is to systematically and substantially reduce barriers to entry and barriers to movement on a global scale. So it is reducing barriers to entry and intensifying competition as a result. The second impact in terms of mounting pressure is that pace of change is accelerating. Studies have been done in industry after industry where product life cycles are compressing significantly. You come up with a great new product or service and get it into market, you have a shorter and shorter period of time to enjoy the benefits of that before something else comes in to replace it. Because if that weren't bad enough, there's a third form of mounting pressure, which is a result of all this connectivity that we're establishing on a global scale, which is that tiny events, often some far-off place that nobody's ever heard of, quickly cascade into extreme events, something that Taleb calls the black swan effect, that disrupts our best-laid plans and forecasts and predictions and leaves us stumbling to figure out what to do now. So these three things, intensifying competition, accelerating change, and the uncertainty created by extreme events, are creating mounting performance pressure. And in part, this is shaped by the growing power of the consumer as a result of these digital technology infrastructures. Now, in part of our lives, we're all consumers. So we're all enjoying incredible benefits from these digital technology infrastructures. We get far more information about the different choices available to us, far more choices available to us, and much greater ability to shift from one provider to another if we're not having our needs met. And we're using that power more and more aggressively. So the result is a pressure on us as vendors, as providers of products and services, in the face of more and more demanding and powerful consumers and customers. So that's part of what's going on. I'd say at a more fundamental level, our belief, based on the research we've done, is that this mounting pressure is being intensified by the fact that we have a growing disconnect between a world that is increasingly shaped by exponential technologies and the linear institutions, practices, and mindsets that we continue to bring to that exponential world. So there's kind of this clash, whereas we face more and more pressure, we just buckle down and try to work harder and harder to deal with that, but in the same old linear way. And our belief is that we need to shift if we're going to take advantage of these technologies and turn pressure into opportunity. So what do I mean by changing? There are many different ways of characterizing the changes that we're going to have to go through. But one of them is captured in the term of moving from a world of push to a world of pull. What do I mean by that? I mean that all of our institutions, and I'm not just talking about business, I'm talking about all of our institutions, were basically organized around a push-based model of resource mobilization. How do you mobilize resources? Well, first of all, you develop a prediction or a forecast of demand, and then you push all the people and resources into the right place at the right time to meet that demand. And in stable environments, that's an incredible source of efficiency. In increasingly uncertain environments, where predictions and forecasts are more and more challenging, that push-based model turns out to be hugely inefficient. As we scramble at the last minute to try to figure out how to move those people and resources that we had in the right place at the right time to a different place at a different time. And in this kind of environment, our belief is the only way to really take advantage of the opportunities is to move to a world of pull, where you're relying on scalable pull platforms to draw out people and resources when you need them and where you need them. Now, many of you who've been in business have heard of pull-based logistics, which is an early manifestation of that, but at least so far, that kind of approach has only worked when you have a limited number of partners in those pull-based networks, 5, 10 partners. When we talk about scalable pull platforms, we're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and in a growing number of cases, millions of participants in these scalable pull platforms that can be drawn out when needed and where needed. That's a very powerful way of dealing with the increasing pressure that we're facing. But we're still at the earliest stages of mastering those techniques. There's another way of characterizing this big shift in terms of the changes we're going to have to go through. And it goes back to the most basic question of all, which is, what's the rationale for large institutions? Why do we have large institutions to begin with? There was an economist back in 1937 who wrote an essay trying to answer that question. It was a pretty good essay. He won the Nobel Prize in economics for the essay. And oversimplifying his answer to the question was, we have large institutions because it's far more efficient and lower cost to coordinate activity across a large number of participants if they're all within one institution rather than scattered across many different institutions. At the time he wrote the essay, it was a remarkably accurate, perceptive description of what was driving the growth of the large institutions we all know today. I think the question on the table in the world of the big shift, is that rationale still as compelling as it was before? Our belief is that it is not, that it is less and less compelling, again, in part given the digital technology infrastructures that make it far easier and lower cost to coordinate activity on a global scale across a very large number of independent participants. And so scalable efficiency isn't a compelling rationale. What is? Will we still see large institutions? I believe we will. I believe large institutions will still play a prominent role in our economy and society, but it will be a different role than scalable efficiency. The role that I think will justify and drive the growth of a new wave of large institutions is the notion of scalable learning. That we will become part of large institutions because we will learn faster as part of those large institutions than we ever could on our own or as part of a smaller institution. That's a very different rationale. I think it's in fundamental conflict with scalable efficiency. And so at the end of the day, I believe all of our institutions are going to have to make a choice. What is the rationale that's driving us? Is it scalable efficiency or scalable learning? And in a world of exponential change, scalable learning implies not just talking about learning within the four walls of your institution. It implies finding ways to connect out to broader ecosystems, broader range of third parties, and building relationships with them in ways where all participants can learn faster than they could on their own. Very different kind of model. Increasingly will be ecosystem focused as opposed to just focused on our individual institutions. So, some big shift, mounting pressure, I think some fundamental changes that are going to be required for us to actually turn that pressure into opportunity. I want to talk briefly about the notion of platforms, because I think that's central in how we turn pressure into opportunity. We tend to talk about platforms pretty loosely and mean many different things. I want to briefly just talk about 4 different types of platforms that are becoming more and more central to how we operate as institutions today. First of all, there's what I would call an aggregation platform. And the focus here is aggregating a set of resources to make it more convenient, make broader choice, more convenient choice. You can think about aggregation platforms in the form of online markets. eBay, Etsy would be examples of aggregation platforms, aggregating buyers and sellers together. There's a second type of platform, which is a social platform. And here the focus is on connecting people with each other. And rather than focusing on transactions, it's focusing on helping to build relationships, a much broader and richer set of relationships across more people. You can think about social platforms like Facebook, Twitter, examples of that. Third kind of platform is a mobilization platform. And here the focus is on mobilizing a set of participants to engage in a common activity with a shared output. You can think about open source kinds of software initiatives as mobilization platforms. There are certain kinds of logistics mobilization platforms, political mobilization platforms like Arab Spring. So many different kinds of uses of these mobilization platforms, but the goal is to collaborate around engaging in some action with some shared result. There's a fourth platform, which at the end I believe is going to be the most powerful one, and yet is the least developed today. And it's what I call learning platforms, where the goal is to aggregate a lot of participants to learn faster, create environments where they can learn faster. We actually don't see many of these learning platforms today in the traditional institutional world. In my Center for the Edge, where we do research on these kinds of platforms, we've actually ended up going out to some pretty diverse arenas like extreme sports, big wave surfing, extreme skiing, online video game environments, particularly war game environments like World of Warcraft, where you see some very powerful learning platforms coming together. I think there's a lot of opportunity for all of us to figure out how to harness the potential of these learning platforms. I want to just quickly give one example of a company. I will say that in this big shift, this notion of fundamentally changing the way we operate, I would say the institutions that are farthest along in terms of making this big shift are actually not here in the United States. They're not in Western economies. They're actually primarily in China and India. And we've spent a lot of time looking at a series of institutions there that embody many of these principles of push to pull, scalable efficiency to scalable learning, and harnessing the power of platforms. One example of a company that's not very well known here in the US, but just to give a quick snapshot of it, Chinese company called Li & Fung. It's in the apparel industry. Their customers are apparel designers like Calvin Klein and Ann Taylor. And they basically take care of everything from sourcing of the raw materials through all the stages of production, through all the logistics on a global scale to delivery at whatever retail distribution platforms you specify as an apparel designer anywhere in the world. The interesting thing about Li & Fung is they actually do none of that activity themselves. They operate through a scalable global platform of 15,000 business partners. They coordinate extremely time-sensitive and cost-sensitive activities on a global scale in very challenging environments. I don't think it's an accident that they emerged in the apparel industry, where predictability is not exactly a key attribute of that industry. That company has grown. It's now generating about $23 billion worth of revenue. And at the same time that Western companies are shrinking the number of participants in their supply chain, for what reason? Scalable efficiency. Li & Fung is expanding the number of partners. They're at 15,000 today, and they're growing every day, adding new partners. They are creating a scalable pull platform where you can draw out highly specialized talent and resources wherever you need it and whenever you need it. Very different model of operation. I think a lot of opportunity to learn from them. One of the most interesting things we found about Li & Fung was when we went out and spent a lot of time with partners in their network, and we asked them, why are you part of the Li & Fung network? Without exception, without prompting, top of mind, the answer from every single partner was because we learned faster as part of the Li & Fung network than we ever could on our own or as part of anyone else's network. Li & Fung has spent a lot of time trying to figure out how you build relationships across a very large number of participants on a global scale so that everyone learns faster. I think there's a lot to be learned from the examples of these kinds of institutions that are on the edge in terms of navigating through the big ship. And at the end of the day, I would just say there are three questions that I think we all should be asking about our own institutions. And that is, what platforms are we currently participating in and what ecosystems are we in? How can we accelerate the learning and performance improvement on those platforms and ecosystems? And what are the metrics that we could use to measure the trajectory of performance improvement? Because in an exponential world, linear performance improvement no longer is sufficient. If you're not improving performance at an exponential rate, you will fall farther and farther behind. So the key question is, what metrics can you use to assess how are you doing and reflect on what can you do differently in order to accelerate that performance improvement. So at the end of the day, I would say that the power of pull, at least in my mind, we wrote a book about it, so there's a lot more to be said, but the way of capturing the power of pull is with scalable platforms, pull platforms. Small moves, smartly made, can set very big things in motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. I don't have my new Apple Watch yet, so it purports that I'll be able to control every aspect of my life. So I can't wait for that. A few weeks ago, I was with my overly expensively educated millennial, one of three. And she was ordering off of Lulu while also doing work. while also watching The Voice. And Lulu was texting her discounts while she was real-time shopping, and she was using a Facebook app to share the dresses she was thinking of buying with her friends. They liked them. She then wanted to have one delivered within 24 hours to the house. She wanted one delivered to a hotel that she was going to be at in 2 days, and she wanted a third delivered to our summer house. With that as a backdrop, what's happening in the world of customer control? Is that a fifth platform? Marshall?
Actually, I was planning on a different question for that. Actually, my own kids are actually doing so much of these things, I'm surprised at the number of things they have demands for. I don't know that it would necessarily be a fifth platform. I do think that John's descriptions are pretty accurate in terms of the number of different types of platforms that are out there. I think the learning being the most powerful of each of these things. My assessment is that you really want to focus on the transactions or the interactions that you take. It sounds like your daughter is enjoying, or son are enjoying a great deal of interaction with it. But it's with lots of different parties. It's almost analogous to what John was saying earlier. Bringing in lots of different parties in the Li and Feng network and being able to handle all of these simultaneously. Drawing it back to Postal, one of the things I'd really like to emphasize is why are these exponential forces taking place? How can you harness these? How do you use them in a postal environment? One of these things I think is data-driven feedback loops. If you take a look at Google, or you take a look at Amazon, or you take a look at Facebook, they do something that's insidiously clever. They analyze the data for each of us, so for your daughter, for example, they then see what that person is doing, and they use it to improve the experience of the other people on the platform. And for each of the other people on the platform, they take that same data and reverse it and use it to improve your experience as you're going forward. Google and Facebook and Amazon all have these data-driven feedback loops. We need to do the same kind of thing in Postal. Where's the data-driven feedback loop that's going to have this happen? A parcel shows up there, or an advertisement shows up, but you need to know, does the user want that ad? Do they appreciate it? Is it going to help them? Where's the data-driven feedback loop in there? Another element of what the exponential, what's happening on the platforms is the exponentiation, is the network effects. Where are the network effects? Where are the benefits from one user that accrue to another user? Those are the kinds of things I think we need to add and bring back to Postal in order to make the Postal platform as successful as some of these other ecosystem platforms. So, I don't know, just let me see. I hope that answers your question.
It does answer the question. I'd like to add something to it and get John's reaction, since you're bringing up this, the data loop, which is so important, and the Postal Service. You know, my friend George Collin, who founded Forrester Research, says every company will become a software company very quickly, whether they like it or not, even if they make potato chips. My question to add on to my first one about the customer's control is the Postal Service equipped to become a software company? And if not, can they buy their way? Can they buy software companies like Quintic or, you know, software working? You know, we had announcements this past few weeks of General Motors saying, I'm going to do less, they're going to less rely on Oracle and HP and hire their own developers and develop and customize their own software to be a better car company. We have John Deere hiring tens of thousands of software engineers to help with the management of farms. I'll leave it at that for your reaction.
It may be a bit extreme to say every company or institution is going to become a software company. Certainly software is going to become more and more central to how we create and deliver value to the marketplace. And I think on a variety of levels. Part of it has to do with the notion of collecting data about customers, getting to know them better, being more and more helpful to them. I think one of the key principles that I have in marketing is, in the traditional marketing, it was all about intercepting the customer, you know, wherever they are. My favorite example of the ultimate achievement of interception marketing is video screens that are being installed above the men's urinal in the men's room. Talk about intercepting capital audience. I think the flip side of that, and the side that will ultimately prevail, is rather than trying to intercept, how do you get customers to seek you out, to seek you wherever you are? That's a very different kind of model. And the way to do that, I think, is by being more and more helpful to customers based on understanding who they are and some expertise that you have in terms of aggregating resources for their needs. That's a very different kind of marketing model, and ultimately requires, if you're really serious about helping customers, not just trying to do it all yourself, but being thoughtful about who else can you bring into the ecosystem to help those customers even more with other expertise. And that's ultimately very much software driven in terms of how you aggregate and make those people, those resources available to customers. But at the end of the day, it's still about human beings and really understanding the needs of the customer and what resources and capabilities you actually can deliver to the customer.
Let me jump in with two thoughts on that. Well, one of the, if you haven't read it, there's a fantastic op-ed, and it's about 2-3 years ago by Mark Andreessen on software is eating the world. It's a Wall Street Journal. It's a fantastic article on how things are changing, how software is entering all different forms of commerce. But I have to almost doubly emphasize John's points. You've got to respect the customer. You absolutely have to look out for the customer and see what they're doing. Let me give you two stories, if you've been watching any of the news recently. There was a very interesting post on the demise of MySpace relative to Facebook. It was actually written on Medium by one of the people who was inside MySpace shortly after it was acquired by Rupert Murdoch. And he said, they were so focused on monetization, all they were doing was trying to chase the money. They kept introducing these ads, maybe some of you have seen them, the punch the monkey ad. You would move the clicker over, and if you can click on the monkey, then you're supposed to win a prize. Well, the prize was a credit card solicitation, an advertisement, if you will. This drove folks off the platform. In fact, Facebook did almost the opposite, because it had very, very lean advertisement. It brought folks in to give them very clean experience. So rather than punking the user or punching the monkey, respecting the user, I think, is a vastly more successful story. This repeats itself time and time again. If you go back in the history of the internet, DoubleClick was there doing advertisement long before Google was. Don't think about that. DoubleClick was doing it long before Google was. They focused on the ad model and the push model of advertising out to the users. Google did the opposite. It focused on the users and focused on the pull model of advertising. When you search for something, then it would give you an ad on that, not the other way around. Emphasize the pull and respect the user, and you'll have a vastly better model. And I think it's highly relevant in terms of the postal ecosystem and how we actually run advertisements. I see we have a question.
Sure, we'll take a question. Can somebody get him a microphone? Please identify yourself too. And anybody else that has a question, we can take a couple before this is over.
Yes, I'm Gene Delpolato with the Association for Postal Commerce, and the first question I want to ask is to John. Obviously we're here talking about Postal Vision 2020, and all too often at past experiences like this, we focused on businesses that don't necessarily have to be postal. You've talked about push versus pull, and I think one of the thoughts that comes to mind is that when you take a look at the postal services that are structured today, you do not necessarily see the characteristics, the inherent characteristics, that you would expect to see within a commercial enterprise. The commercial enterprise is out to maximize gains, minimize costs. As we've also pointed out, one of the incentives is to increase satisfaction. Yet when you look at the rewards or consequences structure that operates within a postal service today, there are no real rewards for maximizing gains or minimizing costs. There are no real rewards associated with increasing customer satisfaction. In fact, if anything, it seems as if the incentives that would apply to the Postal Service are those that during the 1970s and 1980s were always applied to corporation Japan, and that is, don't get your head above everybody else's, go along with the rest of the crowd. Here's the challenge that I would ask of you. What has to happen in order for the Postal Service to begin to appreciate the need to change and have instilled within it the incentives that would be associated with either rewarding it or punishing it in the same way that we do with the people in the private sector?
It's a great question. I think that, like every institution, the Postal Service is under mounting pressure. To some degree, that pressure, I'm an optimist, I'm from Silicon Valley, so I like to believe everything has a happy ending. That ultimately that pressure will be a catalyst for change and will drive both at a leadership level and within the organization a felt need, number one, for change and some creativity and innovation in terms of what are the kinds of metrics that we could use to actually start to focus people on satisfaction of the customer. Because at the end of the day, again, one of the key messages of the big shift is the customer rules. And if you're not satisfying the customer will find other options. And so it is an imperative to find a way to focus the entire organization on more effectively satisfying that customer.
I love that question. That's my nomination for the best question of the morning. But there's only been one so far. I love that question. I think that we absolutely have to emphasize the voice of the customer. And so far, the voices have only been on one side. It's been on the marketing side, not on the recipient side. I'll actually have a proposal later this afternoon for trying to capture that voice of the customer, bring that back in as part of the conversation. At the moment, there's no data-driven feedback loop. There's no way to hear or listen to the voice of the customer. There's no effective click-through rate on what they're choosing and not choosing. And I think that's what has to be part of the conversation. I'll actually have a specific proposal to do with that this afternoon, but I think that really is the question. See if you can bring in the voice of other constituencies so that they too are heard. A platform, if you're going to push or pull, has to have, if it's going to learn, the voices of each of the different constituencies. And so far, only some of those voices are being heard in Postal.
Do you even think people feel they are customers of the Postal Service?
I would defer that to each of you who are mail recipients as to whether or not you're treated as a customer or not. I mean, at the desk, of course, we are.
Do I have a choice?
Deliver it in. You don't have a choice of what's delivered.
Then I'm not a customer, am I?
By standard definition, no.
Thank you. All right, so it's 2020. We have to, Silicon Valley, come on, you have to, it's 2020. Do I get any bills? Do I get any letters? By the way, before I came here, I aggregated my 3 millennials. I think we have a total of 10 physical letters they've sent in their entire lives. That would be a collective 70 years. What's 2020 look like for the Postal Service, John?
I would hate to position myself as an
Be optimistic.
I am going to be optimistic. I do believe, at one level, I think letters, traditional letters, are going to go away. It's an exaggeration. There will always be some, but certainly a tiny fraction of what we have today. On the other side, I do believe there's going to be a significant increase. One of the trends, to be provocative, that we see is the increasing erosion of bricks and mortar retailing and the increase in online retailing. And that raises an issue of, well, how does the product get to the customer? If the customer's not coming to the store, how does the customer get the product? Now, the true visionaries in Silicon Valley would step back and say, wait a minute, John, that's easy. 3D printing, they're just going to print the stuff in their home. There will be no delivery. I think that will work for some products, but certainly not all. And so I think there's going to be a growth in that form of shipment or delivery, and that's the area that I would focus on if I were trying to plan for the future.
Marshall?
Well, we're still going to have to ship supplies for a 3D printer, so there's going to be something. So this is pure speculation, but we can blue sky into whatever we want. For 2020, I think there are a couple different things. So one, I think there's clearly a trend toward digitization. I think that the standard letters will mostly will become digital. There'll be ecosystems to manage that. I think things will be platforms. I think there really will be an ecosystem. Although I think the financial pressures on efficiency and on voice of customer are too high. I think a universal service requirement, we've looked over to more of a digital delivery requirement. Rather than just having a letter delivered to the Havasupai at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, I think there may be ways of getting information to these citizens in digital form. So I think that will be another form of universal service requirement. I do think that the solutions will be in building ecosystems. So if there are any components of the platform, digital postal services, that are not currently being met by an arm of the Postal Service, then the partnerships would be the best ways to try to accomplish that. So I think those will all be the trends in the next several years going forward.
We have one more question from out there before we end. Over here? Okay.
Hi, I'm Brian Bowers from Brown. So the question was asked about the customers, right? Or you asked, are we really customers for the Postal Service? Well, the Postal Service also doesn't have the ability to act like a regular company because they can't fire the customer. We as companies have the opportunity to choose who we will service. The Postal Services have to service everybody. They have to be able to go into the areas where their competition won't go because it's not justified by costs. So how is the Postal Service supposed to react in the 2020 with that?
Well, I think it should just become a real company. So that would be my view. But I'll let my esteemed panelists answer your question.
I was passing the buck, Larry. I mean, quick answer would be that I think on one side, there's an imperative as a result to find ways to more cost effectively serve all the customers, the ones you can't fire, that today may not be very profitable in traditional business terms. So how can you serve them more cost effectively? And then on the other side, it's thinking very strategically about who are the customers that could generate a substantial portion of the revenue and the growth for this institution over time. What are their unmet needs, and focus on how do I serve them more effectively to capture more of their business.
Go ahead, Martin.
I've got a lot of additional insight to add. I think the basics are, we always have to support water, power, sewer, mail. Basics, those are standard monopolies, usually regulated, and we have to have some form of support. But I do think it's essential that we actually introduce self-sustaining business models. I think it's really essential that those services for which there is a premium and for which there's real value be charged for. And I think the Postal Service needs the capacity, whether it needs to go be changing how the Postal Service is regulated. If they're going to be asked to run like a business, they need to be allowed to run like a business. Can't have it both ways. I think it's just not a fair position to put the Post Office in.
John, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, and also a comment, and that is to say that John, thankfully, will be here with us the full time, and this conversation can go on. When I invited John initially, he said, I don't know anything about the Postal Service, and I said, good, because that's the kind of approach we want to take to this. When we began to dig a little deeper, I think he clearly, as we all do, realized that everybody knows a lot about the Postal Service because we're all Postal Service's customers, one way or another. But then there are different kinds of customers, too, that we're going to get a lot into. Because in their model that they're locked into, there's really only one customer in the traditional sense, meaning a paying sense. And the Postal Service must respond to that. So if you act like a business, their customers are the mailers, and the mailers have different requirements than the receivers in some cases. We will be talking a lot about all this the next day and a half. And yet I have one question to ask John relative to your comments about platform, which is an interesting one. And in our second PostalVision 2020 conference was about platform possibilities, and we've been looking at the Postal Service as a platform. And Marshall's platform economics advice and knowledge has helped us understand and look at the Postal Service in that regard. I'm interested in your stages of platforms, and the ultimate one being the learning platform. And Brian, can you go back in my slides to keep going? There, stop. This is actually a USPS image. And another system, word we've been using consistently is the ecosystem, because we all believe we're all part of it. The Postal Service is connected with all of us in that way and connects us, and may be at the heart of this, and works as a circulatory system through this entire system. But it is completely dependent upon these other parts, and we are dependent upon it. And it is $1 trillion industry, what we measure. There are a lot of, everybody here has something very much to do with the Postal Service. And I'm wondering how you could see us taking this learning platform idea into this space, because we often find there's an us and them attitude here. And the Postal Service may not even be represented here this morning, but they can't come because they can't afford to be here. And yet they can't come for free. And they are restricted by the government and all these ridiculous laws that, fortunately, somebody from Congress will be here to listen to. So I'm wondering if you have ideas about how can we move this ecosystem towards this learning platform concept.
Yeah, it's a great question, and there are a lot of techniques that I think can be brought into play. I'd say one of the consistent themes of the work we do, again, is small moves, smartly made, set big things in motion. So rather than trying to think about an entire ecosystem and all the amazing things you can do, find 2 or 3 partners or participants in these various ecosystems and identify some performance challenges that would be relevant to the ecosystem partner and to the Postal Service, and work to convene the participants, the small group of participants, to start doing some problem solving around those performance challenges. And then again, I think being clear about metrics. How would you determine success? So as you start to come up with ideas and innovations and initiatives around that performance challenge, how can you start to measure whether it's having the kind of impact you thought it would, and create the feedback loops that Marshall was talking about, so that you learn faster? And I think what you start to see is those small efforts gain some momentum and traction, is other participants will want to join in because they're seeing the benefits that are accruing to those who have participated. So you build out over time.
So John, here's one where I actually do have some thinking on how you do this. Picture that you have right before you. If each of those members represents a constituency, consider arcs that connect them in a directed graph. And what you want to do is 2 sets of activities. Optimize the positive interactions between each of those members, minimize the negative interactions between each of those members, and help each of those members improve their own services. And you can use those as benchmarking. So if you use data-driven feedback loops for each of these relationships, you improve and strengthen these relationships by improving each strong relationship and helping them become better over time, minimizing the harmful or negative interfering interactions, and then benchmarking each partner so that it improves its own service over time. But you use the ecosystem data to provide that feedback loop for a closed loop system for each of those membership arcs. And there's a very straightforward mechanism for doing that. We use benchmark, we can use data, and we can use metrics to do exactly that. And you can use that kind of figure too as a starting point.
Well, hopefully we'll see everybody in the learning platform then, all learning happily together. Thank you, John. Thank you, Marshall. We'll move on to the next section.
Thank you, Larry. And this is the beginning of learning, at least this next day and a half. I'm not sure, Larry, if you're going to be able with us all day or tomorrow. No, you have to leave early, and Marshall, you are. And John's going to be here even tomorrow. So John, Larry, and Marshall are here for their second or third or fourth time. By the way, I forgot to mention that Jeff Jarvis is not with us. You may have noticed he's not up on the stage. And that's a disappointment to all of us, I'm sure. He has personal obligations that all of a sudden surfaced and he couldn't make it. And there are two other absences. Nordhoff is not going to be with us from Germany, from DHL. He has the flu. And because he's not going to be here in the next session, Bernard has said I can't have this extra 5 minutes to run a little late since we started a little late. So thanks for that. But John, I hope you'll be with us again and join others like Vince Cerf, who's been here several times. And Shirley, I'm sure Jeff will come back again. So this is not necessarily the beginning, but it is this morning of this learning. And so let's keep the conversation going. And we're off to a great start. So thank you, Jeff. Next, you guys can start moving up, Bernard, if you like. Hand those up. Thank you. Our next session is going to take a different perspective on this question. This has been very American oriented so far, and most of this conference is, and we launched PostalVision 2020 as an initiative to reinvent the American postal ecosystem, and that is our primary goal. But we know we have a lot to learn from what's been happening in the other posts around the world, and there are very different approaches. Some are very privatized, some are very commercial, some moved into other areas of business. So with this, we're going to now move into some of an international perspective. And I'm going to introduce Bernard Bukovc. I'm getting better at that, I think. No? Bukovc, say it again? Bukovc. That's better, Bukovc. And who is the chairman of BIP. And I won't waste the time introducing you, so you can do that yourself and your colleagues if you will. Bernard, come on up and bring your colleagues, please.
Perfect.
So, welcome, Bernard.
Okay, hello everybody. Yes, my name is Bernard Bukovc. One day you will learn it, John. And yes, I'm managing the Post Innovation Platform. For those of you who don't know the Post Innovation Platform, it is an open platform. It is an open platform where we try to gather really all the stakeholders from the postal industry to work on the future of the postal industry, to study trends, to study what is going on in the postal industry and what will shape the postal logistics sector. It was launched about 2.5 years ago by 3 partners at that time. That was EPFL, it's the University of Switzerland in Lausanne, the Politik Federale in Lausanne, together with the Universal Postal Union, UPU, and Swiss Post. And since then, we have many more partners on board, and many other stakeholders want to join us. When I say open platform, it's really open, so it's stakeholder driven. The stakeholders decide more or less what we do, and it's post, it's government, it's regulators, it's customers, it's suppliers, it's everybody who has a stake in the postal industry and wants to discuss certain topics in this open environment. I want to introduce to you the panel that we have that we have now here. First of all, we have Pascal. He's the Deputy Director General of the UPU. We then have Ulrich Hurni. Ulrich Hurni is the Deputy CEO of Swiss Post. We then have Tim Walker from the USPS OIG and Kellison of UPS Government Services. So you can see the agenda that we have 2 topics, but we decided to merge it because they're closely linked to each other. So in the first part, we have Pascal and Ulrich, and they're talking about the new postal ecosystem. So we will hear, and I think this is highly important, of course. It has been raised. We had a short event yesterday where it has been raised, and over the past years we always hear it again and again, the international dimension, the global dimension of logistics, and creating this really seamless platform, and we are very keen to hear from Pascal what the UPU is doing in that respect in order to create a seamless cross-border platform. We then have Ulrich Hurni, I already mentioned him, and he will talk about Swiss Post. Swiss Post is, some of you know, one of the most innovative postal operators in the world, and They are doing some quite exciting things when you talk about diversification. The customer of the future will then be discussed from Tim Walker. They did some research at USPS and he will share with us the results. And Keith Kellison will tell us more about the view of UPS on the future of the customer of the future and how they are seeing him, how they are dealing with it. But now let me give the floor to our first speaker, Pascal, please.
Thank you. So thank you for associating your view to this reflection. Vision 2020 is something that we have in common because as you know, at the UPU, we are also having a cycle, and the next cycle being 2017-2020. That's the vision we want to set up. We will, in this very important year, at a worldwide level, discuss this vision. Vision is very important. We just heard from our colleagues the importance and the shifts that we are facing today in our world. So as a Deputy Director General of the Universal Postal Union, in the intergovernmental organization for the postal sector, it's for me a pleasure to be here, but also a pleasure to listen the appreciation of your market, and especially in this country. I will try in my presentation to give you a broader view about what and how the UPU sees the changing postal ecosystem, trying also to set up a picture about the barriers and how we then can revisit the barriers and continue and show you what we can do in terms of integration of all these things. Of course, there is for us a clear shift in market, and we just had also this message from previous speaker. Traditional markets continue to develop. However, growing middle class in emerging countries are increasingly shopping online and fueling the growth of new lanes. E-commerce company, and let me talk about one important continent, which is Africa. E-commerce companies in Africa are not only beginning to mark or to accelerate their presence in the marketplace. As an example, in Nigeria, there is an important market player there, retailer called Konga, which, despite being founded only 2 years ago, is quickly gaining market share within the country, which demonstrate the region's potential. Other regions we can talk about it is, of course, you see in the first slide where this e-commerce story is going to. This growing e-commerce, it's an ingrowing demand for the last mile solutions. And we will have a lot of examples, and the Swiss Post, I do think, will also provide us with experience on that. And here, we have to focus the attention from the sender to recipient customer needs. Another change or shift is the change in the business model. We're not always talking about letters, but there is a strong market shift going on. It's not only a letter decrease in volume, but there is an increase in small packets, because small packets are part of the mail. And parcel, of course, due to this e-commerce. Letter post now makes up less than 50% of the revenue of the post worldwide. Posts are diversifying along the value chain, offering new services. Parcels and service and logistic services are growing. Financial services continue to be important, and here innovation is key to add customer value. We just talked about customers. Then, and it was referred for Marshall, is connectivity and data. New technologies are enabling intake a vast amount of information. Automation improves efficiency. The integrated supply chain provides a huge amount of data for each tracked item as it moves along the supply chain. This information has a huge benefits for operational efficiency, policy creation, new business model, and everyday decision making. The challenge is deriving application from this vast amount of data while safeguarding the privacy. Let's talk about barriers now. There are interoperability barriers between designated operators at the worldwide level and our external bodies like customs, airlines, or between themselves. Customs, for instance, has complex regulations. They're processing slow. There is a lot and a big amount of documentations. Tariffs and return of duty on returns items. Data protections are some of the barriers if we consider customs. The airlines. There is, for the postal sector here, a lack of capacity. We have problems with dangerous goods. And here also, one of the problems is efficiency. We need also to ensure that there is a visibility of items along the supply chain, because it's the need of track and trace. And there is also a product overlap. Another barrier of the postal sector is trust. Emerging markets need to close the trust gap. Customers in emerging markets are much more likely than their counterparts in ICs to mention this lack of trust as an obstacle to buying online. Here, the barriers are security of online payments. Barrier is trust in online merchants, quality of merchandise, delivery, and security of information among some. Another shift is the market development. Infrastructure to provide an e-commerce ecosystem is not developed in all regions. Access to broadband, good postal services, and regulatory environment. 90% of the world economy is driven by micro, small, and medium enterprises and micro multinationals. With the growth of e-commerce and new media technologies, these small enterprises are increasingly becoming an engine of economic development. Most often, in developing countries, international trade remains inaccessible to MSME, in particular those located in rural or remote areas. Many MSMEs are still facing significant barriers in trading across border, where they record very low sales compared to the opportunities offered by international markets. And here comes the UBU. The UBU, with its 192 member countries, with more than 200 operators, designated operators. The UBU, an integrated organization where you find as well regulators and stakeholders. Our mission, since the beginning of our life, 140 years ago, is to secure the organization and improvement of the postal network. It's to encourage the adoption of fair, common standards and use of technology. Is to ensure cooperation and interaction among stakeholders. Is to ensure the satisfaction of customers' changing needs. And just as a reference, during last Congress of the UBU back in 2012 in Doha, Qatar, there were 14 resolutions on e-commerce. So UPU here works with governments and other intergovernmental organizations like World Customs Organization, UNCTAD, WTO, World Bank, ITU, and others to facilitate trade and enable inclusion via the postal network. The UPU global chain. The UPU has been looking beyond the traditional value chain for a long time already. Our three-dimensional network approach, physical, electronic, and financial, provides solutions to facilitate trade and encourage inclusion of all member countries. The UPU strategy is to help member countries to develop new roles and services along the extended value chain and to start with developing their markets in order to take advantage of e-commerce and other opportunities. We work, as I told you already, with other governmental bodies and the World Bank. The UPU IFS is our financial services system, and we will also have the pleasure to hear about Eurogiro. Enables financial inclusion, giving opportunities to the unbanked and rural population. The UPU Postal Technology Center provides state-of-the-art ICT-based technology to facilitate cross-border e-commerce platforms. These solutions are used by 90% of our country's members. UPU standards ensure interoperability with the global customs and payment channels, seamless track and trace, and cross-border clearing based on quality of service parameters. The UPU also offers customer service links, return shipment, and accountability measures, all required by air carriers and other third parties at the interfaces with the UPU global network. How can we now revisit the barriers? Let's talk first about the customs. UPU work with the WCO, World Customs Organization, to simplify processes and ensure alignment of regulations. To help speed up customs clearance on postal items, the WCO and the UPU have collaborated to jointly develop electronic messages to permit the pre-advice and possible pre-clearance of postal items. We have created legal basis for the provision of advanced electronic data for risk assessment purposes. The UPU has also developed security standards, the observance of which are mandatory for UPU members. These standards were developed in collaboration with WCO and ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. We are also working with them to practically implement a system that will enable Post to give customs officials information about the content of airmail for risk assessment purposes and allow any feedback about a suspicious item to be acted upon all before the aircraft take off. The UPU Postal Technology Center has created an electronic customs declaration system called CDS. This is an integrated system that serves customers, posts, and customs administration. It enables customers to enter data about an item online and enables the post to give customs advanced data about this postal item. It also enables customs administration to inform a post about the action to be taken with respect to any given item. It can also be programmed and to assess and calculate customs duties. The UPU, last but not least, work with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime to combat the use of the postal network for the transport of illicit substances. The UPU has also passed legislation to make the transport of counterfeit and pirated illegal items. We also are working on updating and modernizing the customs-related documentation, to developing online system for prohibitions and restrictions, to developing projects to promote the production of accurate and complete custom declaration, and so on. On the transport area, UPU Transport Group is aimed at making the transport system as efficient and speedy as possible. The IATA UPU Contact Group has developed a framework for a service agreement between airlines and postal sector. The UPU has developed various electronic messages which provide liability, visibility on mail dispatch being transported by air. And last but not least, products, what we call Ecom Pro. Ecom Pro is the UPU solution as a response to requirements of customs like Alibaba, ST, Rakuten, and Konga. The UPU developed this e-commerce parcel delivery category, which use globally recognized UPU standards, use existing products plus the ability to customize their fully integrate IT solution suite, reliable data capture and visibility of dispatch, and advanced customs clearance. On the trust now, the UPU has established an intergovernmental, global, highly secured digital platform for global seamless cross-border e-commerce called Post. Post identify legitimate postal services and vendors and avoid confusion for individuals, business, and stakeholders. Post integrates the physical, financial, and electronic dimension of postal services to enable and facilitate e-post, e-finance, e-commerce, and e-government services. The postal financial services can be used to secure payment for e-commerce. And the B2C enables mail management and visibility of all tracked mail items for the moment they are sent to the moment they are delivered. On the market development, the UPU worked with member countries to develop the environment necessary to participate in e-commerce activities. UPU IPC project to provide electricity and broadband access to post offices. Using a model first pioneered by Brazil, the UPU has successfully managed to implement an easy export program known as Exporta Facil that has spurred economic development and social inclusion of MSMEs. Through trade facilitation, designated operators support government objectives for economic and social development and inclusion, while at the same time position themselves as the trust intermediary for MSMEs internationalization. As a trade facilitation concern, many segments of the postal network and supply chain, physical services, financial services, electronic services, customs, airlines, and security, the UPU provides a legal, regulatory, and technical framework to support the development of MSMEs through the postal infrastructure. As I told you, the UPU was established back in 1874 to make order as that time the exchange of mail between countries was largely governed by a web of bilateral agreements. But by the 19th centuries, this has become so complex that it began to impede the rapidly developing trade and commercial sector. Order and simplification were needed in the international postal services. At that time, mail was the internet. The growth in new technologies, the Internet of Things, and e-commerce have upset the pattern of traditional commerce and logistics. The interoperability between stakeholders host private operators, airlines, customs, securities, and e-commerce sellers, and e-commerce and customers, of course, is already a complex web and will get even more so as more and more market players join this opportunity. The UPU could once again help make order in this complex environment by unifying and confusing international maze of networks, services, and regulations into a single territory for the reciprocal exchange of e-commerce, to become a network of networks. The barriers and frontiers that impede the free flow and growth of global e-commerce could be removed, providing the seamless experience customers demand. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pascal. It cannot be stressed enough how important the work is that's going on here that Pascal talked about, simply because, as we all know, if the Post cannot create this single network, the seamless single network, somebody else will. We had a conference at the UPU that was last year. It was in March, and there were all the big players. There were Rakuten, Alibaba, Etsy, and many others of the big e-commerce companies. They said we need this single, this uniform network, this global network that has no barriers. And if we don't have this from the Posts, well, we have to create it ourselves and look for other possibilities. So it cannot be stressed enough how important it is really to have this work and to come to these solutions that we need. So now we have an example from, as I said in the beginning, an example from a postal operator that is really innovative and one of the most innovative postal operators in the world. And here we have Ulrich, who is going to tell us a little bit more about what they are doing in Switzerland. Please, Ulrich.
Dear Chairman, distinguished guests, I would like to start with a question. Who has already been in Switzerland? Quite a lot. So then you know that my first language is the Swiss German, then the German, then the French, Italian, and because I'm also a big fan of your country, and since 30 years I'm traveling to the States at least once a year for holiday. I speak also a little bit English, so I will do the best. What is Swiss Post? In what markets are we active? What are our challenges and what are our responses to them? That's what I would like to discuss with you today. Do you know this mountain? We the Swiss, we like Zermatt, we like the Matterhorn, and all the Swiss like also Swiss Post. So, no, that's true. We really, no, that's in Switzerland. We really ask all the Swiss. I'm responsible within Swiss Post for the mail business, and of course, for our company, I have a lot of mailmen going around all the day, all the year long, and every year we ask 15,000 recipients how they are satisfied with the work the postman is doing. And on a scale from 1 to 100, we always get results between 92 to 95. But we are not only asking the recipients, of course, we are also asking the senders. And the senders are not the millennials, the senders is not me, because we are doing the business with the big companies and not with the individuals. That's also important for us. So our small country has only 8 million inhabitants. That's 40 times fewer than your country. We serve around 4.1 million households 7 days a week. And our country is 240 times smaller than the United States. We cannot make ourselves bigger than we are. And geographically speaking, the Swiss postal market is definitely a small market. And our company is like many other postal companies making the transition from a state institution to a modern enterprise. And Swiss Post, yes, we still have a monopoly up to 50 grams. But we also have a very strong universal service obligation. And I'm very convinced that we are really having an excellent service, and that's part of the infrastructure. And I think this excellent infrastructure we have in Switzerland, and the postal service is one of them, makes our country so important for many, many international companies too. We employ 60,000 staff, generate a turnover of 8.5 billion, and an EBIT of roughly 850 million, so the company is quite profitable. We carry approximately 6 billion letter and newspaper items and 150 million parcels. Swiss Post is active in 4 business sectors. First, the bank. PostFinance handles almost 150 billion in customer deposits and is the clear leader in the Swiss payment transaction system. Then our company PostBus. Also, this company is the clear market leader in the road-based public passenger transport. Postal Logistics has a market share in the parcel business of about 70% in the B2B and 90% in the B2C segment. And my business unit, PostMail, we are responsible for the mail, the newspaper business, of course. We generate a turnover of 3 billion with an EBIT of 300 million. Of course, in the last years, we also developed various new services. But all these services are still very, very close aligned with our core business. For example, Incamail. Incamail is a secure email solution. And with Alstyne, we have made digital signature possible. And there are various other initiatives on the way. For instance, in the e-government sector with e-voting systems, and we are quite heavily investing also in the e-health business. We still have a very dense postal network, the post offices all over in Switzerland. In these post offices, we also sell third-party products worth more than 500 million every year. But the contribution of all these initiatives are making to our operating profit is still very modest. So let's talk a little bit about our challenges. Of course, first comes the letter volumes. The letter volume also in Switzerland is declining, and that's not new. That's the case since 10 years. Every year, the volume is declining 1 to 3%. That's a little bit like in Germany or in Austria. You know, in Scandinavia, it's much more. Also in France. But I think in France, at least last year, it had a lot to do with the economic situation. What is clear for me, the decline in the transaction post volumes, it is unstoppable. And it will go on. But if you know that with my business unit, I'm generating a turnover of 3 billion, I always say to my staff, even if the volume will go down by 50%, it will remain a big business. And if you do a good job, then you can do also a good business with 1.5 billion. Another challenge, of course, is the entry into the market of new competitors. You know them, like, for instance, like Amazon. They have nothing to do with our core business. They are entering in our business. And then, of course, the competitive pressure will go on, will become stronger, even in Switzerland, because we have, you have seen it, quite high market share in all the businesses where we are in. And of course, what's more, I notice that the recipients are demanding more and more. But what is also clear for me, very often they are not ready to pay for the service they are asking for. And then, of course, Pascal said it, we have to improve the international products. We have to work better together, we, all the posts. And that's a big challenge for UPU and also for the IPC, because the remuneration system, the terminal system, they have to cover the costs, what they are not doing today. Some of our answers to these questions. For me, it's clear we are opposed, we have been opposed, and we will be opposed also in the future. And we have to focus on the core. I'm very convinced that the core business also in the future, also in 2020 or in 10 years, will be the basis of our service, and we will generate the turnover and the result with our core business. What is also clear for me that we cannot become a global player as Deutsche Post now with DHL. So we have to focus on our core business in Switzerland, and we have to defend the market shares we have in all of our segments in Switzerland. And there are also examples that to become big is not always a success. When I look a little bit at the history of the Deutsche Post, for instance, I was a little bit jealous 10 years ago when they bought TNT. But when I look where they stand today, I think it was not a bit successful. What we are doing, we are really working together with partners. For instance, in the international mail and growing e-commerce business, we founded 3 years ago the joint venture with La Poste, Ascendia, and I'm very proud to be the president of the board of this joint venture. The clear goal, it's the clear goal there to become the #1 worldwide. And also in other segments in the e-commerce business, we have to work together with partners. We will grow the volumes that there I'm very convinced with the e-commerce business. For instance, if I look what we get last year from China Post, the volumes from China Post to Switzerland from 13 to 14, they doubled from one year to the other. But when I looked at all the import volumes, what we get from Germany is still 13% more. And then one of the main tasks where we have to work on, and I think it's not only true for our company, for many companies, we have to work also on the price. What I said, we are really doing everything for the customers, but they have to be prepared to pay the price. So the shift from the old business to the new ones requires clearly a mind change. But for me, it's also clear that quality will continue to be important for Swiss Post. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ulrich. We have the questions afterwards, so we have the 4 speakers first, and then we start with the discussion. Tim, Ulrich mentioned already that customers are becoming more and more demanding, and you have done some research on that. Can you enlighten us a little bit how that is?
Morning, everyone. Well, I only speak one language, so I don't have an excuse when I start plugging my words here. I'm very pleased to be here at PostalVision 2020. I love the title because usually we say it's hindsight, it's 2020. And since I'm going to be speaking of future needs of the customer, we'll keep that in mind. There's no surer way to look foolish than to try to predict the future with any certainty. Consider a quote from a Fox executive, Darryl Zanuck, in 1946. He said, "Television won't be able to hold on to any market it captures after the first 6 months. People will soon get tired of staring at a plywood box every night." 70 years later, we're somehow still watching 5 hours, and if you're the parent of a young child, you know most of that is usually frozen. Technology is hard to forecast because it relies on consumer adoption, and people are notoriously hard to predict. But over the past few years, we've seen people adopt technology in a way that gives us a new baseline. Access to the internet through increasingly cheap yet powerful devices like smartphones has transformed how people consume information, goods, and services across demographics. More than 3/4 of consumers now carry smartphones, and they use them to research, comparison shop, and buy products at any time and from anywhere. Expectations are sky high, and the margin of error for businesses is getting narrower. If you don't get things right, all your competitors are just a flick of the thumb away. And it's not just one person's business on the line either. According to McKinsey, social media and review sites now carry 10 times the weight of your sales force. The vast majority of consumers check these sites before buying anything. Consumer empowerment is a particularly nuanced issue for the Postal Service, which is fundamentally a platform for communications and commerce. It connects consumers with each other, businesses, government, and increasingly the rest of the world. To maintain and grow these connections, we need to ask what their future needs are and be ready to meet whatever they may be. The answer may start with consumer empowerment, but it quickly gets more complicated. After all, they're also a product of their environment. Again, consider how the internet and smartphones have changed the equation. Now imagine the trajectory of dozens of other technologies. Just for another example, the Internet of Things. Some analysts say it will fundamentally change our day-to-day lives, while others say it will primarily affect industrial applications. Who's right? Do we have slides? Excuse me. Sorry about that. Further, none of these technologies operates in a vacuum. They exist in a larger ecosystem, influencing and being influenced not only by each other, but also trends in society, industry, government, and so on. And there are countless ripple effects to consider. It quickly becomes overwhelming. To attempt to make sense of these signals and understand the changing needs of customers, we conducted in-depth research, analysis, and expert interviews covering more than 80 of these trends, many of them with uncertain futures. We didn't expect to predict exactly what will happen, but rather construct narratives to understand what could possibly happen. After combining trends and accounting for uncertainties, 2 prevailing consumer-driven forces or macro trends emerged. First, we looked at patterns of mass consumption. On one hand, products, services, and the entire consumer experience are just starting to be created based on individual preferences. Recent advances in data gathering and analytics allow businesses to provide tailored, intuitive products and services. 3D printing can revolutionize manufacturing by allowing companies to create custom products for every consumer, or even more impactful, consumers may create their own products at home. On the other hand, online communities have given rise to the sharing economy, in which individuals value access over ownership, saving over spending, and conserving over consuming. If you haven't already participated by using Craigslist, taking an Uber, or outsourcing with Fiverr, chances are you will soon. Second, we looked at consumer brand preferences. The lifespan of some brands has begun to decrease, and more companies are consolidating or being acquired. According to an Insight study, 75% of the largest 500 companies could be replaced by 2027. Mobile access, globalization, and cross-border trade are opening up new brands, or international brands, to new markets. And technological advancements are facilitating more startups and peer-to-peer opportunities. Consider, for example, that consumers have pledged $1.5 billion for undeveloped products through the website Kickstarter. But if consumers prefer trusted, more traditional brands, larger companies with established reputations or access to more resources are likely to prevail over newer ones. So, if we intersect these competing forces, it allows us to explore 4 plausible futures, scenarios based on how various trends might play out in discrete ecosystems. We explored how small and large businesses, government, and consumers might behave in these worlds, and how the Postal Service could meet the resulting needs. We looked 5 to 10 years ahead, given the ever faster pace of technological development. We also constructed 4 customer vignettes to tell the story of how one transaction might occur in each world. Today I'm going to focus on 2 of those. Of course, knowing precisely how the world will look and operate in the future is impossible. The idea is not to evaluate the likeliness of any of these scenarios that they will come to fruition, but rather to think about how the Postal Service can prepare for trends, and prepare if given trends start emerging in certain ways. And now, future scenarios. The first we call All Eyes on You. It is a world in which large established firms dominate by meeting consumer demand for highly personalized goods. Privacy is less important than the convenience of streamlined custom experiences. Consumers freely share health and other personal data with companies. The federal government plays a role in identity protection to facilitate business and to protect consumers. 3D printing never caught on at home, but additive manufacturing is the realm of large enterprises. Firms also use cognitive analytics to act on big data to quickly target microsegments and help create custom goods for their unique needs. In a world like this, there are a number of implications for the Postal Service. The growth of custom-made goods means more packages, and obviously we love this scenario. But the delivery network will have to keep up with a more diverse market. Assistance with logistics will become crucial. A new market might also be digital identity services with inputs and verifications provided by letter carriers. Or perhaps to help small businesses get a leg up, the Postal Service joins a hypothetical Moving Makers program, a public-private partnership with local agencies and venture capital firms. It gives individuals access to 3D printers and physical space in post offices to test and market prototypes. To give some flavor to this scenario and understand the role the Postal Service can play, we'll talk about one of the customer vignettes we've done. Custom kick sneakers are all the rage. Derek sees how many likes his friends have gotten on their social network, and he logs into the company website to design his own pair. He spends about 30 minutes using the company's interface, but the price is too steep for him as a student. Kick's analytical software sees that Derek designed a pair of shoes, but didn't buy them. It calculates that he is a loyal brand advocate and an influencer in his large social network. Like Kick, the Postal Service has taken advantage of reduced cost and customization and automation. It's created a cloud-based network linked to its in-house digital printers. So Kick software requests a personalized mail piece, a 2D rendering of the unique shoe Derek designed, along with a coupon. Within minutes, the custom mail piece, one of thousands processed this day, is printed and sorted for delivery. The next day, Derek is surprised to find a piece in his mail, and the personalized marketing and coupon do just the trick. He scans it with his phone, which simultaneously notifies Kick of the order and the Postal Service of the pending delivery. This future, the in crowd we call, is the opposite in terms of our construct. Startups dominate in a collaborative economy. In this scenario, consumers are environmentally conscious and they support social causes. They form communities based on local geography, but also on borderless affinities and shared interests. Startups actively engage with social networks to select new markets as global firms try to go local. The Internet of Things has exploded with dozens of sensors in every home. Thanks to wireless broadband, developing countries have jumped into the digital age, inspiring a truly global crowdsourcing. Now, as a whole, this world might seem like a stretch, taking emerging trends to some extremes. But as an exercise, it provided us with some valuable insight, if only even portions of the scenario come true. Post offices, for example, could be used as places for sharing goods, or storing, or as warehouse space to cut down on shipping times. They could even take hold of electronics for recycling. With its vast delivery network and presence in every community, the Postal Service could connect even far-flung areas to facilitate collaborative consumption. Growth in shipping is driven by cross-border, peer-to-peer exchanges. One more story. And I will say I tried really hard to incorporate zombies into these future scenarios, but fortunately I lost that battle. Min and Sarah created the perfect kitchen design with in-house consultants at Case, a new local company offering sustainably sourced furnishings. Unfortunately, they do not have a reciprocating saw to help them demolish the old structure. The saw is expensive, and they probably won't use it again. Upon checkout a case, they are offered the opportunity to rent a number of tools for a low daily fee. They can pick up the tool in store or at a local post office, or even on a parcel locker on their way home. If the tool is currently being used, then one can be shipped to them as soon as it becomes available. Once they're done, they place the saw in a nearby parcel locker, which automatically notifies the Postal Service. It will go back to case or directly to the next consumer in the queue. So how do you go from potential future to current concrete plans? How the future will unfold is always uncertain, but technology and innovation will continue and people will adapt accordingly. By exploring a wide variety of scenarios, we were able to imagine a range of future customer needs and envision how the Postal Service could meet them. We also came up with 5 conclusions that cut across all the scenarios. First, when planning for the future, it pays to start with the consumer. If you're reacting instead of anticipating, you're probably already too late. Data, analytics, automation, and integration with your partner's IT is almost guaranteed to play a role. Fourth, in a tech-dependent world, face-to-face interaction may become a differentiator. And fifth, a monopolist approach will kill you in a consumer-driven market. Diversity is required. The Postal Service needs to prepare for the future even as it improves the present. If it doesn't, it will find itself like other traditional, seemingly stalwart models of business that disappeared when they failed to anticipate change brought by external forces. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions in the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Tim. So, what is UPS's view on the customer of the future and your response to that? Please, Keith.
Last but not least, since I have one over on time, John, I made one slide. The issue, of course, is you could talk all day about each one of the topics on this one slide. But the global postal value chain from a customer standpoint, what impact does a customer have? We've talked a lot about customers this morning. And in a nutshell, it has every impact in the world. It dictates the supply chain. Who wins, who loses, who succeeds, who fails, what happens in the future. Now, the customer doesn't always know what the customer wants or what they need. That is partly determined by what service providers start to drum up and teach customers what is available. But they will ultimately determine who succeeds and who fails. Post right now, but for the limited to this form, I'm going to stick to letter mail, which posts pretty much have a lot on, and parcels, which both the post and the private sector are competing with right now. And there's tremendous upside, in my opinion, both. Letter mail has declined, but I still think it has longevity, it has relevance, and it is going to be important for many years to come. So we shouldn't undersell letter mail. Now, where does the value chain begin or end? That's a $64 question. It's huge. At the end of the day, it's arguably, the way I put it in sustainability terms, cradle to grave. You could arguably say that the value chain begins when an item isn't even thought of by the customer. And then it's created, manufactured. And then, of course, it is created, shipped, transported, and used by the customer. And then it's recycled or sent back to a UPS facility where we refix their items and we send them back out. And then ultimately displaced and destroyed. So it could be everything. But what is it to everybody in this room? Well, that depends on the individual capabilities of our organizations who we represent. And that's pretty much self-determined. The customer will want a lot. It's up to us to figure out what the customer is willing to pay for, pointed to it earlier. And when we are strong and capable of providing part of that value chain for the customer to ensure longevity and success. Now, who are the players? Well, they can be anybody in this room, frankly. You have a shipper. That's a traditional customer. Been mentioned many times. They pay the bills. They're important. Yeah, consignee is getting important. But the shipper is still very important. Consignee, we've talked about many times. They are long-term, and I think a lot of people hit on it today, in power to become very, very, very significant. They are determining now who ships, how they want it shipped, when they want it shipped, what they want. And so the consignees are very important. But I also will go, it gets more complicated than that. UPS ships for the Postal Service. We transport a lot of their mail. We sell their goods. They deliver our parcels. We are their customer. They are our customer. Most people in this room are somebody else's customer and vice versa. So it gets very complicated. But again, what determines who does what is based on our expertise and our strengths and our weaknesses. So what are the critical components of success? What makes this all blend, if you will, towards a long-term success? First of all, working together. It's mentioned many times, Pascal hit on it, very important that the posts work together. It's also very important, in my opinion, that the posts work with the private sector. Since we all have our strengths and our weaknesses, nobody can do everything. UPS isn't going to go compete against Amazon and sell items. That's just not going to happen. It's not our strength. And I don't think that they're getting into shipping at the same time. We have some pretty core strengths in that. The posts have core strengths on the letter network and parcel networks as well. So sticking to those and leveraging the strengths of each organization within that supply chain is critical towards everybody's success in this room, in my opinion. As I mentioned, UPS, we transport the letter mail for the USPS. FedEx does it as well. Hopefully, the USPS is satisfied with the services, they're continuing with it. They're delivering our parcels. SurePost is a program which we developed a few years ago, FedEx has Smart Post. They deliver our parcels. I commend the Postal Service on what they call work share. Frankly, I think the last mile delivery, as mentioned by previous participants, is critical because it enables the industry to start to pick and choose the strengths and weaknesses within each organization. And work share, in my opinion, the USPS started many, many years ago. I started participating in the mid-90s, actually. It was one of the first work share partners, running a company called Regional Mail Express. And it works. The Postal Service is able to sit there and basically outsource competencies that are not as profitable to them. That results, and we are able to outsource things for us that are not as profitable for us. The consumer wins in these. They get the best service, they get the best solution available through our cooperation in maximizing our strengths, and then hopefully minimizing our weaknesses. So working together, I think, is one of the most imperative things we have. Not just post to post, but post to private sector as well. We all have something to bring to the game here. Technology is absolutely huge right now. On the domestic side, of course, it's creating customer expectations. And what's interesting is UPS published, it's not too long ago, it's a Pulse of the Online Shipper publication. And basically, they interviewed almost 6,000 online shippers and tried to figure out what their needs were, demands were, and where it's all going. And, everybody keeps saying price, free shipping dominates. You know what's interesting about it? Free shipping came in fifth, the most important attribute for those customers. Still important, don't get me wrong. But what was most important? Technology, visibility. Where are the pieces? What's the status? When am I going to get it? Can I control the next pieces that are going to be delivered? So my experience is in my control as a consignee. That was number one. 10 years ago, consumers never even thought they had the capability to do that. And that to me is a perfect example of where industry provides solutions, trial and error, customers take some, consignees don't take others. But at the end of the day, we have created, I say we, everybody in this organization and beyond, created customer experience and customer expectations that are now number one and number two and number three and number four on this list that didn't even exist 10 years ago. And so those expectations are shifting and changing, and we have to be on top of it. Again, though, maximizing our strengths, minimizing our weaknesses, and teaming up where it makes sense. That's where technology comes in handy, not just one from the visibility standpoint, two from the delivery standpoint. UPS has what's called Orion. When we say it's real time, it's as close to real time as you get as to dynamic routing for parcel delivery. And it enables us to literally take 5 to 10% off of the delivery times for each one of our drivers because the system knows the trends and the routing for each individual route, even though they're not experienced 20-year drivers. That's a technology that affords efficiency. There's technologies that afford safety as well on the international side. Pascal mentioned earlier how the EPU is working to try and have secure set customs and safety standards, as well as security and advanced electronic data supply for the EPU. I applaud that because the safety is very important from a consumer standpoint. But we have a lot of work to do there. But technology is required all the way up and down, particularly in a cross-border scenario. Without the technology and the ability to transmit and give all the way from the beginning to the consignee, the development of data, then we're going to be challenged. So the market-based consumer experience, what I wanted to hit on that one there is it rationalizes everything. John Hagel said earlier, the customer basically wins. They create the successes and the failures. What I want to impart from the post standpoint, as well as the private sector, is if we don't all conform to what the customer ultimately wants and demands, then we will fail. And I say this for both post as well as the private sector. Right now, we're being asked, the private sector in 2014, is being required to submit ACAS data, as Eric called advanced screening data, to 47 U.S. government agencies, and the EU is doing the same thing. That's used, number one, for customs compliance. It's used, number two, for security compliance. The FDA, the Bureau of Alcohol, whatnot, they look at these items and make sure that high-risk items are flagged. To Pascal's point, the EU has been working with that on the CBS items as well. But if those security items are required for everybody, is all items that UPS handles, packages and letters. I'm not saying the letter post necessarily makes sense, but it should apply to UP packets as well. Packets right now, the largest small parcel number of packages delivered within UP right now, and they weigh up to 4.4 pounds. And so, from a customer standpoint, they will demand eventually that those requirements be met for all of those parcels by the shape of the piece, not necessarily how it's internally classified. Otherwise, if someone gets hurt, or if someone has a bad bug, then it's going to be, it was imported through a post, then it's going to be the customer who will demand change. And I think everybody wants to proactively avoid that, and again, that's how I do applaud UP's efforts to go in that direction. Same thing with security we hit on earlier. And the last thing on the parcel delivery within the post, obviously we welcome our competition, we expect it, and we participate in it, and we enjoy it, frankly. There's a lot of people work with many posts, and I'm going to end on an anecdotal note in a moment. But at this time, as all organizations start to enter into the parcel delivery arena, we have to make sure it makes economic sense. In the past, posts have relied on universal service obligation networks for the post, as well as delivery for parcels, and I understand that makes complete sense. But as a drive network, as it drives expenses, we have to make sure that it makes financial sense for all. Otherwise, if it's not longevity and it doesn't have a long-term lifespan, then the post will suffer, and certain governments will have a bailout going on. But at the same time, competent posts can't make it profitable. They just need to understand their costs and need to make sure that they can be self-sustaining standalone letter mail as it continues to decline over a hard time supporting the networks. But there's great opportunities, and that's the note I want to leave on. The domestic on the international side. When I attended, along with Pascal, and others, through his gracious leadership at the UPU, I went to the Doha conference about 2 years ago. And during that, there were 192 member countries, all of which wanted to do the right thing, all of which wanted to deliver letters and parcels as best they can. And the needs are hugely diverse. Some posts have a lot of capabilities, others have very few capabilities. UPS has certain capabilities in some areas, we don't have capabilities in other areas. Finding out how to collaborate with those organizations, how to sit there and have maybe an international sure post, as we have. That's domestic last mile delivery for the United States. Why can't you do it internationally? I don't know. I think there's a need out there, because we're not going to have infrastructure anymore. I think there are places where the posts would use our technology, we could use their infrastructure. The sky's the limit. So there's tremendous opportunities for leveraging our capabilities and theirs as well. And so I think the upside is huge. But in the meantime, though, one of the biggest things that we have to do, both post and private sectors alike, is know where our strengths are, know where our weaknesses are, know ultimately as best we can determine where the customer is going, where the demands are going. Because their demands, if we focus on areas that we're not strong at, their demands will ultimately cause us to fail. If we focus on where we're strong and leverage other organizations and their strengths, then we together will succeed. And that is the empowerment of the customer.
Thank you very much, Keith. So now we have time, not very much, we do have some time for Q&A. Who wants to ask the first question? Please. What?
Yes, please. I'm Jim Campbell. I'm a lawyer in Washington. I wanted to ask Mr. Clivaz and Mr. Hurni to comment on the international situation a little bit more. Now, Mr. Clivaz pointed out that the business is changing quickly. The package revenues are up to something like 50% of total postal revenues. And Mr. Hurni noted the growth in traffic from Asia. It seems to me that, and it would be useful for the audience to understand clearly, that in many ways the international marketplace is really the leading edge of the changes that are affecting the postal industry. The international marketplace is shifting more quickly from letters to packages. The e-commerce is even more important than the international than the domestic. And it seems to me that the leading edge of the leading edge is the growth of e-commerce packages from Asia. That it's doubled in the last year in Switzerland, but not only in Switzerland, in many other countries, really in the industrialized world. And it's not only last year, but for the last approximately 3 or 4 years, there's been growth on the order of 100% more or less from Asia, particularly from certain countries that are concentrating on e-commerce, to these industrialized countries. And that's really changing the balance of mail around the world. So perhaps you two would like to comment from your different perspectives about the kind of unique nature of the national.
Pascal, me first. So thank you, Jim, for this question indeed. We are today living in a world where things are happening and these flows and this shift in the way the consumers are behaving is clear for us at UBU. We are streamlining all these flows and we do expect this, and we also have the same impression, this 2-digit growth on this e-commerce industry is amazing and a real challenge for the UBU and for the members of the UBU. There are a certain number of challenges that we have today because, of course, they are using these small packets, which in talking logistics in the country, they are treated like mail. And we are now working with our Ecom Pro, our e-commerce solutions, to figure out how we can set up adequate products to respond to that need. Of course, there are other challenges like the customs, for instance, and the customs procedures. And here we are also trying to solve a certain number of issues. In the different countries, the perception and the behavior of the government and the responsible is obviously different. Some are trying to protect their own market, others are trying to open the market. So it's a huge debate that we are facing now in a couple of weeks. Starting the 15th of April, we will have our Operation Council, and here we will have to talk more on that. The same way I refer to the strategy, World Strategy Conference we'll have the 13th and 14th of April in Geneva, and then to replicate this worldwide in the region, that would be for sure an issue in preparing in the coming 20 months the UBU Congress. So.
What I can add, Jim, is if I look to our example, in terms of volumes, what we are generating in the export is 10% of the total of the volume. So 90% is still domestic volume. But it's true, it is growing, and it's really growing from Asia, what we are getting from Asia. And what we heard also, it has a lot to do with technology. We have more than 190 posts all over the world. All of them have a history, and all of them has been the post for their country, like Swiss Post for Switzerland. But every post in the technology developed their own system, their own barcode, so there is no standard, and there is a lot to do, really, to connect these systems. That's what we heard from also from UPS, what we can learn from the integrators. And it has also a lot to do, of course, as always, with money. If today we get less from China Post for a parcel than what we get from a customer in Switzerland. So when you send a parcel from Zurich to Geneva, then we invoice more than what we get. And when we are doing a delivery for a parcel, what we are getting from China Post. So there is a lot to really to improve. And it's also true for Ascendia. Ascendia has also offices in Singapore and in Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, we started really 7-8 years ago. It was a small really a small company, and actually it's booming a lot.
Thank you very much, Ulrich. I have to close it because otherwise Trump is angry with me. I want to avoid that. I want to thank the panelists. We have of course, the opportunity now to ask questions, to discuss with the panelists during the coffee break. And don't forget, tomorrow we have our sessions, and for example, Ulrich and Pascal will be in the closing panel because we want to hear, of course, next steps, wrap up of the conference, and there you will also have the possibility of asking more questions. So, do you want to say anything, or?
Just want to mention that tomorrow we have a cross-border session. Actually, we'll be going this in depth tomorrow.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you very much to the panelists. And we'll soon 20 minutes out. Yes, fine.